Here we go. When you set out to adapt Jeffrey Manchester's story, what element of the real-life person did you want to emerge to recreate the theme in his adapted story?
The thing that there's so many contradictions in the real Jeff Manchester. Mm-hmm. So you have a hardened criminal that locks people in a freezer, but he gives them jackets before they go in. He's an army vet that escapes from prison and doesn't live in the woods. He lives in a toy store. When he is on his way to freedom with a plane ticket in the seat next to him, he's at the off-ramp to an airport. He decides to turn around because his girlfriend calls him and he doesn't want to just ditch her.
Right.
So what I initially saw with him was this character that he would have been a better criminal if he would have been more cold-hearted. And it was his humanity that kind of screwed things up for his criminal enterprise. And so I thought that was the interesting way to go, is to try to find the humanity in this guy who makes these giant mistakes, who's actually not very good at being a criminal. He shouldn't, if only he would use his superpower in the right way, but he just couldn't find that. So, he's a bit of a character that's doesn't fit in. And he's a piece of the puzzle that doesn't fit. He can't find where he's supposed to fit on the puzzle board. Right. And, but he so desperately wants to fit in. He so desperately wants to be loved and to give his love. Yeah, absolutely.
You put an interesting spin on religion as a redemptive force in Lee and ultimately Jeffrey's life. With all the debate in America as a Christian nation, what angle did you want to emphasize about the storefront church, including the pastor and his wife, that served as an anchor to the story?
Well, all that came from my research.
Okay.
So the church that we shot in was the actual church where Jeff and Lee met.
Okay.
The pastor of the church was one of my consultants. He's actually in the movie. He plays the pawn shop owner. His name is Pastor Ron. Mm-hmm. And I'd say two of the most important conversations I had in my research doing this movie was talking to Pastor Ron and to Lee, his girlfriend.
Okay.
The real people. I had kind of assumed that they were going to be angry with Jeff or feel betrayed or feel bitter about their experience with him. But when I talked to both of them, they just spoke with such... They talked about him like he was this unicorn that came in their life. Lee said he was the greatest adventure of her life. And they spoke with him with such empathy, actually. Mm-hmm. And I was asking Ron about religion one day, because I grew up Catholic, but I daydreamed. Every Sunday I daydreamed in church.
You and me both, pal.
Yeah. You Catholic?
Yeah.
But I asked Ron, I was like, tell me about religion. And he says, well, the first thing you got to know about the Bible is that the Old Testament's all about judgment and the New Testament's all about grace. And that in his life, he tries to err on the side of grace. And I was like, okay, so I thought about this story, this guy who was judged pretty harshly by society. And the judge who sentenced him to 45 years is also in the movie. I spent a lot of time talking to her, and I understand all the judgment. But I decided that maybe the movie could follow Pastor Ron's view of grace. And I thought, that community was really this diverse melting pot. The church he did create, they were playing Beatles songs, and he was playing Can't Buy Me Love and giving sermons about greed and capitalism. Mm. And so I thought it was a great opportunity to show this church that really existed in a new light and not be connected to any of the prejudices or archetypes of what the church may mean to certain communities now or not, And this movie's a bit nostalgic in that way. It's looking back at this time and maybe a possibility when people weren't as divided. And I thought that church was a beautiful way to do it.
Yeah, I like that element of the movie. So you had a dream team cast with heavy-hitting performers up and down the call sheet.
Yeah.
What impressed you about the approach the performers took to their characters And what elements of those performances exceeded what you even imagined when you were adapting the story?
They all exceeded. I mean, as a filmmaker, I'm very fortunate to be able to like cast my dream team in the movie.
Yeah.
These are all like some of my favorite actors and some of my favorite people. Some of them I've worked with before. Some of them I just always dreamed of working with. I mean, I've been trying to work with Channing for like 20 years. Kirsten, I grew up watching her stuff. And I think the thing, if I just pick Kirsten for an example, because I could talk about any of them, but she blows me away because here she is, a child star who we've seen grow before our eyes. And when you know Kirsten, she's salt of the earth. She's the most real, regular person. And she's a mom. And the most important thing in her life is her kids. And so what I loved about working with her specifically was her ability to take this character that in someone else's hands could have come off as like gullible or a victim, and she played her with such strength and such love and such grace. And so anyway, I love it when actors take my script. I always tell them, surprise me, because I write a script for like, this script is 4.5 years. I watch the movie in my head every day, but when I'm writing, and all I want to do when I get on set with actors is to be surprised by what they bring.
Did Channing bring anything to
everything.
Quirk, yeah.
Everything. I mean, Channing is like one of the most sensitive, heartfelt, empathetic people. I had a friend once who was at a wedding, like a real famous person's wedding, and he was sitting at a table, and he knew no one. He knew no one at the table, and Channing recognized that in him from across the table and took care of this guy.
Wow. And
that's just who Channing is. So I think I was like really impressed by his heart. We all know, though, he's like one of those rare actors that can handle every genre.
Right.
He can, in a movie star level, he can be the romantic lead, he can be the action lead, he can be the dramatic lead, he can be the comedy lead. He's got some of the funniest moments in the last 20 years, and he also makes memoirs, autobiographical movies about his life, and so I knew he was courageous too. And on top of that, he's a dancer, and he can move, and I think that's a little bit of a lost art, because so much of acting now is like on the golden age of TV, it's dialogue,
right,
talking. And I think that Channing's, one of his superpowers is movement and listening and stillness. And I mean, so much of this movie, it's like Castaway. He has to act with toys.
Wow, that's right.
Right?
That's true.
And that takes an actor with such a high level of engagement with the audience.
It's a solitary role.
He
strikes me as a guy who's leading actor type, but a character actor in heart.
I think you're right. Yeah.
So Roofman, like Blue Valentine, emphasizes a couple's relationships while events swirl around them. In your early career, what fascinated you about the dynamics in coupling, where love, while a very powerful force, cannot conquer all? And how did you contemplate this through your 20s that led you to create your stories?
When I was a kid, I had two nightmares. One was nuclear war, and the other was my parents getting a divorce.
Interesting.
And I spent my whole childhood studying my parents, I think. I sat in the back seat of the car while they were in various states of their relationship. And I think when I was 20, they did get a divorce. And so Blue Valentine was like my response, my cautionary tale to myself, to try to, those characters aren't my parents in that movie, but that's like a version of me, and like trying to navigate and trying not to repeat those things. So
you did so artfully.
Oh, thank you.
It's a beautiful movie.
Thank you. It's the actors. So all I try to do is like connect on those human relationship levels. I feel like movies are a great place. It's like you sit in the dark and you're watching the light on the screen. It's not like theater where you're there. The actors don't know you're there when you're watching a movie, and so you can get into very private moments. And I think I try to embrace all those secrets that a movie has then, and because I think in families you actually know who people are. you get to know people so intimately. And so that's what this movie tried to deal with. It's like Jeffrey has this secret the whole movie that he's not sharing with Lee until the end. But he's telling her so much more truth about himself as well. Anyway, I'm just fascinated. I think movies are made for relationships on screen.
So one of the underlying topics in the film that I thought was fascinating was the working class in America.
Yeah.
You know, you're showing the McDonald's people, you're showing the Toys R Us people, even the Army comes into it.
Yeah.
So, and those are examples of jobs they're willing to take on to support themselves and their family. Now, how does the socioeconomic class of Jeffrey play into his crimes, do you think?
I mean, it's huge. So I grew up in the suburbs of Denver. I grew up working at Walmart, going to McDonald's for my birthday parties, and this is my people. And one of the things I remember being in high school, I remember having a lot of my high school best friends. Remember, they would always bemoan the fact that they lived in the suburbs.
Right.
They wanted to live in Denver. They wanted to be from the city.
Right.
And I used to tell them, but we're here. This is where we met. And I find oftentimes in movies, not only working class, but also suburban people the filmmakers get too intellectual, or they look down on the people, or it becomes like a satire, or it becomes, like poking fun at those people. But those are my people.
Right.
That's where I come from. I love, that's my family. Those are, and
you treat them with great respect, both in this film and Blue Valentine, for example.
Yeah, I want to. I don't judge anyone. Like, I don't feel like I'm ever a judge of any character or any person, because in my life I've never met a hero and I've never met a villain like you see in movies. I've met people that make mistakes and do good things and do bad things, and they're just human. But anyway, with this, Jeff also felt that way, right? One of the things about Jeff that I found very interesting is like that piece of the puzzle trying to fit a play. He wanted so much to fit into that kind of society. That's what he told me stories about walking around when he was trapped in that toy store, and he would walk by a park, and he's like, I could hear these families having barbecues, and I could see how happy they were. Right. And then he said, and that's when I realized I wanted a barbecue too. And so that was like the little thing that was off about him. He thought that if he could get the stuff, he could get the love. And he goes to an extreme, but I think that's very relatable for people too.
What fascinated you, and this is my final question, what fascinated you about the skills of survival that had to be developed when a musician loses his hearing and his whole perceived life as you were developing Sound of Metal with Darius and Abraham? And what life lessons did you learn for yourself in creating such a unique scenario? I just was so taken by that.
So I grew up, I played drums growing up. I played heavy metal drums.
Wow.
And I really I've damaged my hearing a lot from that. And so I had this fantasy of, I was just imagining as I would go to sleep at night and hear the ringing that I'm going deaf.
Right.
And the idea of the movie came to me one night that I was going to tell a story about a guy, heavy metal drummer, ends up losing his hearing, tries hard to like replace that, and then realizes though he found who he was in that world of the deaf. And so I found this band. There was a couple bands I was looking at with heavy metal drummers that I loved. One was called High on Fire, which was like three dudes, sweaty dudes, and then one was called Jucifer, and it was a husband and wife, and they lived in an RV, and they pulled around 3 tons of like amps with them as they traveled the country. So I asked them if they would do a hybrid version of their lives, and so I spent a couple years with them. So all that kind of codependency that you find in the movie, and all that kind of like their life on the road and that relationship was born from this documentary. Of me putting these real people, this documentary people in a narrative. But I got to the point where they couldn't be anytime you work with actors, there could be a time where they said, where they could say, oh, my character wouldn't do that. And when I was doing that, these real people said, oh, we wouldn't do that. And I realized that I couldn't make real people do things that they didn't, they couldn't represent themselves. So I abandoned it and gave it to Darius, and he took that thing and just made it fly with, because Darius is like super genius.
Yeah. This is Patrick McDonald for HollywoodChicago.com. Copyright 2025.